You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestel. The Yowie, released in 2006, has long been one of my favourite books in the field of cryptozoology. In their eagerly awaited follow-up, The Yowie Files, authors Tony Healy and Paul Cropper have presented scores of recently unearthed colonial-era reports, which go right up to the modern day with some incredibly compelling witness accounts. Joining me to cover some of the accounts in the book, as well as some other cryptids from around the world, is our good friend Tony Healy. But as always, before that, don't forget you can support Mysteries and Monsters by signing up at patreon.com/mysteriesandmonsters. $4 a month gets you ad-free episodes, guaranteed early releases, bonus content, and more. You can also click the link in the show notes as usual. Mysteries and Monsters is across all social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Mysteries and Monsters channel on YouTube. And don't forget, you can visit mysteriesandmonsters.com for episodes and merchandise. Thank you as always to Dean Bestel for his marvellous artwork. The show is produced by Brennan Storr of the Ghost Story Guys, and Mysteries and Monsters is delighted to be a part of the Straight Up Strange network. Let's peel back the foliage and see just what lurks in Australia's hidden shadows. Tales of the hairy man began to appear at the beginning of the 19th century in Australia. Others called them Australian apes, yahoos or yaris. And of course we now call them Yowies. In their new book, The Yowie Files, Encounters with Australian Ape Men, authors Tony Healy and Paul Cropper cover a whole range of newly discovered colonial reports alongside some hair-raising modern encounters. Joining me to discuss this fascinating topic is our good friend, the marvellous Tony Healy. Tony, welcome back, sir.
Great, it's great to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me, mate.
Oh, you are very welcome, Tony. I've been eagerly awaiting the release of this book for what seems like years, Tony, but I think you only told me about it a year ago. But it seems like it's been 5 years, because as the new book mentions, this is a companion to the wonderful book you and Paul did in 2006, The Yowie, The Search for Australia's Bigfoot. And as I was just joking to you earlier, one of the key reasons I got a Kindle back in I don't know, 10 years ago was because I couldn't trace a physical copy of this book, and I just thought, I've got to get hold of it. So I got a Kindle to get you and Linda Godfrey's books, because I just couldn't find any of them anywhere, Tony. So that, for me, was just jaw-dropping, because I've always had an interest in Yowies, but I just didn't realise how many reports there were. And obviously since reading that and getting to know you and finding out about Dean Harrison and the work they do, I'm astounded just how prevalent and long-standing these reports are, Tony, because often one of the criticisms about Bigfoot and Sasquatch reports is that certain people say, oh, well, it's only a modern thing. People were only talking about it since the 1950s, since the footprints were found. And yet, in both of your books, we're basically looking at reports that go back 200 years, aren't we, mate?
That's right, mate, yeah. Yeah, that's one reason why we felt obliged to do this second book, because some people were still saying, well, it's just a bunch of Australians copycatting the American Bigfooters, you know, aping our American cousins, so to speak. And you know, a lot of people, I don't blame people for having trouble accepting that there could be such creatures in Australia, but yeah, there just seemed to be this reflex reaction. Oh, yeah, they're just copying the Americans. But Paul, particularly, he's very good at archival research, and when we wrote The Yowie, the preceding book, and published it in 2006, we had 100 reports dating from, well, you could say the very late 1700s, but certainly the very, very early 1800s, about 100 reports from then right through to what we considered to be the beginning of the modern era, 1975. We thought that was pretty convincing, that there was 100 reports right through that century and a bit. But in the years since, we've dug up an additional 100 from that period. So we've now got 200 reports dating from the early 1800s through to 1975. So we included them all in this book, in this new book, along with a lot of photographs of the pioneers, the various identities who saw the creatures back then. Photographs we didn't have, when our earlier book came out. And as you say, just to bring the Yowie saga right up to date, we've included 71 modern era reports from 1975 through to 2022. So a lot of them are courtesy of our good friend Dan Harrison of Australian Yowie Research, who we've collaborated with for nearly 30 years now.
Mm.
So, we're pretty happy with the book. What do you reckon about the cover? Isn't it great?
It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I loved the original cover because that's kind of a very traditional image of a hairy man. And then this one is incredible because its eyes look as though it's staring through you, Tony.
Yes,
I'm glad I can't see
face.
the cover at night, I have to say. I could just see the spine because it is very chilling.
Yeah.
But
but you're right. You're right. The cover of the preceding book, the Yowie, was painted by Percy Tresize, who was a great discoverer of Aboriginal rock art in North Queensland. He's dead now, but he and his Aboriginal mate, Dick Ruffsey, discovered many illustrations of Paramulli, the giant quinkin, as they call the Yowie up there. And this painting, as you say, it's in the style of the Aboriginal rock art. So, we're happy with that. But we really like this new illustration too, the new cover, because it's well, as you say, the thing looks like it's just turning around and saying, hey, back off, buddy. This is my patch of forest.
Obviously, when we've spoken before, Tony, you've been interested in cryptozoology now for the best part of 5 decades. You took yourself off around the world monster hunting as a young chap. When you went, logging in Canada to go look for Bigfoot and Sasquatch up in that particular area in the Pacific Northwest, and you've been over here looking for Nessie. When did the Yowie appear on your radar, Tony? Was it all at that period of your life where you were looking for these legendary creatures around the world, or was it something that you'd grown up with, hearing the stories about, or is it one of those, because I've often heard, which I find surprising, I suppose it depends how much you're into this particular topic, that some people didn't realise how prevalent experiences and encounters with Yowies were until they kind of stumble across Dean's YouTube channel, or they've heard a couple of other people or seen a documentary which occasionally might mention the Yowie. Was it something you were aware of before you went on your globetrot and monster hunting, Tony, or is it something that it's kind of developed as your love of the subject has?
Well, yes and no, I suppose you'd have to say. Although I'd worked all over Australia in just about every state by the time I was in my early 20s, and I'd worked with Aboriginal people in Western Australia and on Melville Island off the Northern Territory coast, the subject had never come up. And I'd never heard a word about it. I knew by that stage about the phantom big cats, Black panthers, out-of-place cougars, because I'd seen one myself, a very brief sighting of a cougar-like animal in North Queensland. But no, I'd never heard of the Yowie. And then I went overseas and, as you say, I worked in the logging camps of British Columbia, and the lumberjacks used to talk about the Bigfoot, or the Sasquatch as they called it in Canada. And it slowly dawned on me that they were taking it quite seriously. They said, oh, yes, the Indians all believe in these things. And so I thought, oh, okay, that's pretty interesting. And sometimes on the weekends, I would take my little plastic camera and go toddling off down logging trails. I was thinking, well, if they're there, maybe I'll see one. I got back to Australia and immediately started researching the subject. I got in touch with John Green and bought all of his books and corresponded with him. And Odette Chernin's book on the Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, gee, I really got to get myself back overseas and case these, the Sasquatch and the Yeti.
Yeah.
And then, lo and behold, a young fellow I was working with who came from the south coast of New South Wales came to work one day, and he said, oh, the Aboriginal kids down on Brown Mountain, down around there, are very excited at the moment because the Dooligal's been seen again. I said, what's that? And he said, oh, it's like a big ape man thing. I said, oh, what? Holy moly, really? Come on. And then a surveyor I worked with introduced me to another surveyor whose grandmother rather, had seen a Yeti-like creature in the Tinderry Mountains to the south of Canberra here, towards the Snowy Mountain. She was so excited by it, she talked about it the rest of her life. So I thought, oh, yeah. And then when I I saw a couple of articles in the tabloids, the cheaper Sydney papers, articles featuring Rex Gilroy, who claimed to have seen a Yowie in the Blue Mountains, and he claimed what seemed mind-bogglingly high number of reports. He said, oh, I've got 2,000 reports. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds a bit rich. Anyway, I went to see him, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead because he died recently.
Yes.
But he was pretty well. I couldn't get a straight story out of him. It was just incoherent, and I thought, oh, this can't be right. No, he's making this up. So then Graham Joyner, an archivist here in Canberra, produced a small booklet called The Hairy Man of Southeastern New South Wales, and it contained 26 brief historical references and a couple of eyewitness reports from the colonial and early modern era. And so I thought, oh, good grief, there is something to this. And I was right on the verge of going overseas to chase the Sasquatch and the Yeti. And I thought, oh, my God, what is this? So Graham and I went down and visited the homestead where this old lady said she saw the Yeti-like creature in the Tinderry Mountains. And, of course, I avidly read Graham's book. He was of the opinion that these things must have become extinct. I couldn't really see why they should have, but in any case, that was about all I knew when I went overseas. So after 2 years overseas chasing the Yeti and the Sasquatch and the Orang Mawas in Malaysia and the Yeho in the Bahamas, not to mention the little hairy men of Fiji, I came back to Australia all fired up, and I thought, okay, I got to see what this Yowie thing's all about. And almost immediately I met Paul Cropper. In fact, Bob Ricard of 40 and Times put me in touch with Paul, who lives in Sydney. And Paul had he was only 18 then, but he'd already been researching the Yowie for 4 years and done a few little expeditions in the Blue Mountains. So we hit it off. He's a riot. He's a very, very funny man, very intelligent, and a great, as I say, he's a terrific archivist. You know, he just seems to have the magic touch for turning up these very early Yowie reports. So, we've collaborated and on 4 books now, 2 on the Yowie, 1 on poltergeists. That came on the back of, as they say these days, on the back of a very remarkable experience we had in the Northern Territory, where we were embedded, as they say, in a really full-on poltergeist episode in 1998. So, and then, of course, back in our first book was called Out of the Shadows, and that covers the Yowie, the Australian water monsters, the bunyips, the Tasmanian tiger mystery, the alien big cats, and what else? Is there something else? Oh, mainland thylacine reports. So Paul's he's really onto it. He's part Indigenous. He's got Aboriginal ancestry, he's got an Aboriginal family, and he's has in mind putting together a study exclusively about Aboriginal Yowie lore. So that's a big subject. We've put as much of Aboriginal Yowie lore as we could in our first book, and quite a few items in the second. But the Aboriginal people of Australia, as far as we can see and as far as we've been told, they almost all believe in the existence of big, hairy, ape-like creatures or man-like creatures, Bigfoot creatures, in fact. Plus they, many of them believe that there's another type of hairy hominid less than 4 feet tall, usually about three and a bit feet tall. It goes by many names depending on the language group and the area of Australia. Often it's referred to as Jungidi or various variations of that word. Jungidi or net or there's even some sort of, in the modern era, there's some sort of English terms, wood archies or brown jacks, certainly. But it's not only Aboriginal people who've seen the smaller ones. Quite a few non-Aboriginal people have seen them too, and we have a couple of those, or several of those reports in the new book.
I suppose it's strange when we think about it, because when the first book came out, as I said, Tony, in 2006, for a lot of people that would have been the definitive work on it, and you would think, it's only 17 years ago, how much has changed? But as you've mentioned about Paul's ability to uncover archival accounts and everything, you think how much old newspapers and journals have been digitised, that none of us would have probably had any concept of just how much information about all kinds of strange things from the late 18th and early 19th centuries were out there, because it's one of those things you can... When we think back to how people used to do research, Tony, they'd go to their local library, and therefore often they would be fenced into that particular area or that geographical location. They wouldn't be able to spread out unless you physically went halfway across the continent to get to where you needed to go. So for you, if you wanted to go up to Sydney or Brisbane or anything, you would obviously have to, a hell of a journey to get out there from where you're based in Canberra. And it would be the same, somebody in the US who was living in Seattle who had heard stories about the skunk ape.
Yeah.
It's amazing how things like this are now classed as just second nature, that we can just log on, go into a certain site and pull up newspapers from 200 years ago and have a look at it. And you just think it's remarkable.
Yeah.
You know, as I was saying earlier, Tony, the stories about Bigfoot seem to be based on a very narrow band of people saying, oh, well, it only started in the 50s. But once again, as it runs parallel with the stories of the Yowie, there are reports that predate this, you know, by 100 years in North American literature. I find it incredible that there is still this skeptical point about this phenomenon, that people say, oh, it's just modern folklore. And when you look at some of the early reports, because I've got Chad Arnott's incredible historical Bigfoot book, which is massive. I think it's like 1,200 pages, Tony. That's got stories from every state in the US and Canada, and it, you know, all the provinces up there, and it's got reports going back to the 1850s, 1860s, and they're once again, they're called hairy people, or they believe them to be feral. So when you look at the colonial reports from the early days, Tony, is it a similar kind of concept of people thought these might be when the colonists were encountering them or hearing these stories? Because obviously one of the key aspects of this is there's no comparable creature in Australia that people could mistake it for, because often North America people say, oh, people have just seen a bear, they don't know what they're looking at. Is it that kind of aspect down there, Tony, that people just thought these were tall tales, or they thought, God forbid, oh, well, somebody's mistakenly not recognised a kangaroo?
Yeah. Sometimes the early Europeans, the British settlers, would say, oh, the Aborigines must have seen a very hairy escaped convict, or they did know about orangutans, you know, that aren't, well, they're a few hundreds or thousands of kilometres away in Indonesia, but just north of Australia. So in the early days, they sometimes would say, well, there must be orangutans in Australia, because it was a long time. It was several decades before exploration extended much beyond the area around Sydney, you know. The Aborigines were telling them about the hairy man, or Doolagal, or various names they had for it. But some of the early missionaries and settlers would say, well, perhaps there is some sort of equivalent to the orangutan, because actually they didn't know much about African gorillas back then. You know, I don't think the gorilla was fully understood by naturalists in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So I might be wrong there. But anyway, certainly Australia's a hell of a long way from Africa. So sometimes they'd say, well, there must be something like orangutan in Australia. Other early settlers sometimes said they must be like the European wild man, you know, because it wasn't long before that quite a lot of people in Europe believed in the wood house, you know, the woodwoozer, the giant hairy man who would grab ladies and carry them off into the scrub. So some of the one early report we have from Port Hacking, just south of Sydney, the two fellows there who were approached by a giant hairy man. They were saying, well, one of them had read Gulliver's Travels not long before, and he said, you know, there's the creature in Gulliver's Travels, there's the creatures called yahoos, which are like hairy ape men, really. And one of these guys was saying, well, there must be yahoos in Australia, you know. And I don't know whether it's a coincidence or what, but in Gulliver's Travels, the yahoos inhabited an island called the Land of the Winhams, and Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travels, placed Wynnum's Land just off the south coast of what is now South Australia. So I think it's just a coincidence. But it seems like, talk about coincidences, I think it's true that the Aboriginal people in some areas of around Sydney area did refer to the Dooligal or the Yowie as the Yahoo. So, I mean, it's only 2 syllables, so it's just a coincidence there, I think. Yeah, so, it took a while for the Europeans to accept that the Aborigines were really, reporting something that seemed to have some flesh and blood substance.
I mean, it's an interesting point that you raised there about Gulliver's Travels, because I think, what was that written about 1725, something like that? That's nearly 300 years ago.
Yeah, 1726, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so it would have been really at the sort of, especially for the UK.
Cook was here in 1770 along the east coast.
The Dutch had been, hadn't they?
Yeah, see, the Dutch, had mapped the part of the northwest coast of Australia and the west coast and the southern coast right around to that spot where Jonathan Swift placed the fictional land of the Wynnums. And I guess he chose that spot for his mythical land of the Wynnums because at that stage, that was the very end of the known world, 1726. So, nearly 50 years later, Cook turned up and mapped the East Coast. So, pretty strange.
Do you think perhaps, I mean, it's interesting because Gulliver's Travels these days are seen as a fantasy story, really, but at the time it was done as a kind of satire about modern life and capitalism, which a lot of people overlook these days. It was kind of done as a sort of comedy. It is peculiar that he's placed this particular place where he has inhabited by creatures that are very similar to what is being described. Do you think that perhaps somebody from the Netherlands had come back and stories had been passed around, trade merchants and in higher society where they'd tell these tall tales, Tony?
That's occurred to us, but there's no proof. I suppose it's possible because there are Yowie reports in all up and down the west coast of Australia where the Dutch explored, and sometimes they were marooned for periods of time on the west coast. But then again, I don't know. I'm not aware of Aborigines calling Yowies Yahoos way over in the west. As far as I know, that they use that term in New South Wales, and one source that says they used it in Tasmania as well, which is a bit of a jump, but there you are.
So, I mean, this is the other interesting parallel with North American First Nations and Native Americans, Tony, is that a lot of the tribes there have different names for it. And I think often when people consider Indigenous Australians, they just presume, I think, that they all speak the same language. But clearly, as with any sort of peoples living on a vast expanse of land, they would probably have grown up in isolation, really. So are there different strands of the languages there are in North America where you've got different tribes who speak different languages? Is it the same? Was it the same kind of thing in those days with the early indigenous populations? Did they have the tribal structure where they had their own languages? So that's why you've got so many names for the Yowie now.
That's right, Paul. Yeah, there were about, some people say about 250 different languages.
Wow.
Some of them, obviously, neighbouring languages. Some of them would have been similar. But, and they had trade routes across various wide distances in Australia. But I don't think individual Aborigines, not many of them anyway, would have travelled all that far. Some of them around Sydney, I was reading just recently, had no knowledge of the Hawkesbury River, and the Hawkesbury River's not very far from Sydney. So they had all they needed around Sydney. They were living in clover there until you British, or we British, shall we say, turned up.
I find that very hard to believe, Tony. Surely we made everything better.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah. Paul Cropper's, as I said, he's dug up quite a lot of info about his Aboriginal ancestors. He has one ancestor, Turdwit, who was born in 1780,
Wow.
and he guided some of the early explorers in the Sydney area. Very well-known Aboriginal person. He's in the Australian Dictionary of Biography, and
Wow.
several of Paul's ancestors, European and Aboriginal, were notable people. But yeah, there's an early book about the settlement of Sydney by the British. It was called The Day the Sky Fell Down, and I suppose that sort of sums it up in a way. It's I guess it'd be like if a fleet of UFOs sort of descended on us now and sort of told us that all our religions were ridiculous and kicked us off our best land and so on and so forth. We'd think that the sky fell in as well, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. When it comes to these particular subjects, and as you've mentioned about Paul's genealogy, is it a blessing that Paul's got this experience in regards to uncovering some of the older stories and the tribal stories, Tony? Because I would imagine, because of, as we've been joking about everything that's just happened over the last couple of minutes, is it one of those situations where the indigenous population became very sort of withdrawn from sharing their beliefs and their folklore and their customs because they were poo-pooed by these learned people of science? And it's the same in North America, where they'd got these they kind of withdrew. So the stories of Sasquatch and Bigfoot and the Wendigo were kind of pulled away from the settlers. And so they've kind of kept them to themselves. So Paul, having this family and the strand of his history where he's got such notable luminaries from the indigenous population, Tony, has that made it easier to uncover these particular stories because he's seen as somebody that can be trusted and supports them in regards to promoting their beliefs and their experiences?
Well, no, actually, he was adopted as a baby by a white couple, and it was only he knew that he was part Aboriginal, but he didn't make contact with his Aboriginal side until about 7 years ago.
Wow!
And now, he's full on into it. But I used to say to him years ago, given that you're got some Aboriginal ancestry, you think that's why you were sort of drawn to the Yowie phenomenon? Do you think that? And he used to say, "Oh no, it's just I'm naturally curious." But you just sort of wonder whether there's something to it, because he certainly, as I say, he was marvellous at digging up early reports. But of course, as far as I know, I don't have Aboriginal ancestry at all, and I was always fascinated with it too. But he's fully in touch with his Aboriginal family now, and he's in fact he just yesterday he was he's a executive with Telstra, the telephone company, and he's been up in North Queensland just the last few days, working with some Aboriginal bodies, Aboriginal organisations to, advise them on IT and that sort of thing. Anyway, he's a good mate, and we've had a lot of fun with these books. But as you said in the beginning, this second book took an awful long time to see the light of day. We got distracted with other projects, and I had a couple of overseas trips and this and that, and Paul got married, and of course his work became more and more demanding. But we finally got it done, and we're very happy with it. One thing I should mention about the book, in case people haven't heard, we've got an appendix in the book where we cover some images of the Yowie, some thermal images that were taken by Dean Harrison and his colleagues. They're like all, you know how cryptozoological photos are never quite clear enough,
yes,
to prove anything. Well, these come close.
Yes.
To my mind, I fully believe that Dean and his mates got these images, as they say, because I know Dean very well, and I know Buck Buckingham, who actually took the shots, and I have no doubt whatsoever that the shots are genuine. And as you can see, you would have seen there on page, say, 309 of the book, Paul, there's a 3-shot sequence where one of the Yowies is leaning over, and you can see the face, the head in profile, and the arm going down. It was evidently picking something up. Well, so as Dean said, he knows that these images aren't going to set the world on fire, and they're not going to cut any ice with determined skeptics. But if you read the account of what happened, and if you're at all open-minded, you would have to say, well, it does seem as if these things can be photographed, at least in some circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously I follow Dean's YouTube channel for the Yowie research team, because obviously they have some incredible interviews with people. And it's one of those aspects of this whole thing that Dean was probably the first person I ever heard about who was researching into the Yowie. Probably about the same time I became aware of yourself and Paul, Tony, because you guys had done an article in the Fortean Times in the mid-90s, which I think was which was based on some of the stuff you'd covered in Out of the Shadows, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking now it's probably, I don't know, 94, 95, 96, around there. It's one of those I remember. It's one of the first ones I ever bought, Tony, so I always remember it. I always remember the strange
That'd
cover.
Be right, yeah.
with the red sky and everything, and all the sort of images put over the top of it. So I remember seeing Dean on an episode of the American show Sightings, talking about his experience, which was from around the same period, and that's when I then became aware of what was going on. So in the modern era, along with yourself and Paul's research and the 2 books that you guys have done, Dean's channel is a phenomenal resource, because some of the people that Dean and his team interview, Tony, are very salt of the earth. They're matter of fact. Some of them are from all parts of the Australian continent.
Yes.
Are you still surprised that there are people that still view this subject as make-believe or folklore, regardless of the evidence that's been building up and what Dean and his team are out there doing regularly?
Yeah, I am a bit, frustrated by it. But, it's like Rene de Hinden, the old Sasquatch hunter, said. He said, anyone who thinks the Sasquatch is just a joke is ignorant of the facts. It's as simple as that. And that goes for the Yowie as well. I mean, I think if I could get the arch skeptics at gunpoint and force them to read our book, or even better, to sit down and go through a lot of the recorded reports on Dean's site, then I think most of them would have to acknowledge, well, look, there is something to this. Of course, they would then say, justifiably, well, if these things have been seen for 2 centuries now by non-Aborigines in Australia, and by Aborigines for God knows how long before that, how come we don't have at least one body? How come we don't have so much as a single finger bone to show? And they've got a point. You know, you can't get around it. The physical evidence for the existence of the Yowie is mighty, mighty thin. I mean, we have mountains of excellent eyewitness reports. 50% of reports of encounters occur in daylight. 1/3 of all reports involve more than a single witness.
Yep.
Many of the reports are extremely close range. Then we have tree damage, branches twisted and smashed, trees smashed and uprooted. We have footprints. But there's a problem with the footprints. There are footprints left sometimes. Not often enough, though, the skeptics would say, and I agree, that there aren't enough footprints. For some reason, they're very, very rare. Only about 1 in 10 Yowie incidents result in footprints being left. And you'd think if something the size of a Yowie would be, if there were thousands of these creatures running around in the bush, even on the dry ground of Australia, there'd be plenty of footprints. Yet there aren't. And another problem with the footprints is that they're inconsistent in shape. Unlike the North American Sasquatch and Bigfoot, which are predominantly 5-toed.
Yeah.
Ours are just as likely to be 3-toed or 4-toed. So, I mean, even after all these years, I've got a couple of plaster casts over there on the floor.
Yeah.
In all the years, I've only seen what I was absolutely pretty damn sure were Yowie tracks once. And they weren't particularly well defined. It's just that they were obviously bipedal, and they were in and around a lot of trees that had been broken and smashed, and the footprints were leading up to and around areas where stick formations had been created. These stick formations are a hallmark of Yowie presence. I've seen these stick formations on a few occasions. So yeah, it's you got the mountainous number of terrific eyewitness reports by, as you say, salt of the earth people, farmers, rangers, police, SAS troopers,
Yes.
highly trained SAS troopers, regular soldiers, scientists, a couple of scientists. We got a great report by a scientist in the new book. He's an anthropologist, and by Aboriginal people, bush Aboriginal, country Aboriginal people, and more town type Aborigine.
Yeah.
So, and a few reports by migrants, like straight off the boat, practically, who'd never heard of the Yowie. Just absolutely never heard of it. So, yeah. So anyway, sorry, I'm rambling off a bit there.
Don't be daft. Never apologise, Tony, for talking about these wonderful subjects. You're all right, my friend.
Let go of your reality and step into a realm beyond your wildest dreams.
A place where the veil between the living and the dead is paper thin.
Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances. I'm Mike Brown.
And I'm Morgan Knutson. Join us and the world's leading experts as we deep dive into stories about poltergeists, cryptids, and other tales of the unexplained. Search for and follow Supernatural Circumstances on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
I think one of the aspects that's always kind of intrigued me more than anything is that often when we hear about encounters with other hairy creatures, more often than not in other parts of the world, there doesn't seem to be this kind of fear factor. And the amount of times I've heard people interviewed about their encounters with the Yowie, Tony, there's a lot of them where they've got a real... You can hear the fear in their voice about what happened or what they saw, how it affected them, primarily because I think people presume that because Australia has some massive cities and it's, culturally known all around the world for its music and fashion and food and all sorts and television programs, I think people forget just how big the place is. And there's large swathes of the place where nobody lives at all whatsoever. You can go hours without seeing another car in certain parts, or even people, or anything, depending where you are on the continent, Tony. Yeah. So is this fear something that you would suggest? Because there aren't many encounters where people seem to have been physically attacked or anything. I know a few have over the years, and the same in North America and the Himalayas as well. But there always seems to be a real fear aspect to Yowie encounters in Australia. Is that something that you and Paul have continued to uncover in the new reports that you've included in the book? Or would you say it is like most encounters with strange creatures? Some people find it incredible. Some people find it terrifying.
Yeah, well, yes, certainly a good percentage of modern eyewitnesses still mention the terror. But it doesn't affect everybody. It seems to be a bit of hit and miss. There's a certain percentage of sightings from moving vehicles, and usually there's no great terror involved there. The things standing on the road or beside the road or walking across or running across. And that's it. The witnesses are very, very excited, and sometimes jumping out of their skin with excitement. But other times, strangely, even from the safety of their car, they experience abject terror, which seems sort of out of proportion to the experience. It seems odd. And some of the witnesses who encounter the creatures face to face or reasonably close, within 50 or 100 metres or closer, many of them are scared half to death. Some of them have post-traumatic stress, the modern term. Others are just very excited, and that's it. Others can go through very, very terrifying episodes, like where Dean, in his first encounter with the Yowie, was chased.
Yes, he was.
He was terrified, but the terror didn't stay with him. On the other hand, it just made him more and more curious. But on the other hand, on a subsequent occasion, when he was actually shoulder charged by one and knocked into a creek, he had really PTSD for a long time after that. I remember he used to phone me up and he'd just talk and talk. Couldn't get it out of his mind because it seemed like the thing, it was pitch dark, the thing just came charging through the scrub like a bull elephant, thump, 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 crash, crash, crash. And Dean threw up his hands and this thing hit him right in the middle of the chest. Dean fell into a rocky hollow in a creek, and the thing was on his, he said it jumped on him.
Yeah.
But he said he was so terrified that he was just flailing with his legs and fists and screaming his head off for his mates to come and get him.
Yes.
And his body was covered with bruises. He sent Paul and I a shot. Was taken in the shower, I guess, by his wife.
Yeah.
And he discreetly covering the family jewels, but his body was severely bruised, like from his neck right down, to his ankles. So really severe bruises.
Yeah.
And he was freaked. He said, "Oh my God!" And it was a while before he could go out there alone again. And I certainly wouldn't be able to after that at all.
Yeah.
But he continues to go, even by himself. he's been back up to that spot, for instance, where he and his mates got the thermal images, been up there after dark by himself. And I said, oh, for God's sake, mate. I mean, it's rough country. You know, you could get into trouble up there in daylight, let alone dark. But he's a very courageous guy. There's no two ways about it. But the terror, Paul Cropper and I borrowed a term off H.P. Lovecraft, I think the guy who wrote horror books.
Yes.
He had this term called nameless dread.
Yes.
And we've employed that term to describe the fear that a lot of people just mention when before they see the yowies, before they see them, they're out there in the scrub, and all of a sudden they think, oh my God, something's watching me. And then the hair goes up on the back of their neck. They get goosebumps all over them. They start to shake, and they think, sometimes they say it's as if there was a very loud, a voice in their head that was not a voice saying, get out of here, get out. And Rodney, what's his name, fellow I know down the coast, his name escapes me for the moment, he experienced that, and he had a new chainsaw and some other gear with him. And he just dropped everything and shot through, jumped in his car, four-wheel drive, down to the road, and then he stopped and he thought, what in the hell am I doing? And then forced himself to go back and pick up these things and take off. Yeah. But, the nameless dread. And another thing that, that has been described in North America too, that fear, but
yes.
But it doesn't seem to feature, as you say, anywhere near as much as in Australia. But another thing that we noticed, when researching and compiling the cases for this book, when we certainly noticed it earlier too, in earlier decades, but the number of people who use the term, it was as if I was sort of semi-hypnotized.
Yes.
Or I was in some sort of a trance, or I've got a couple of notes here as I speak, actually, or I was mesmerized, or a couple say the whole thing in a way was like some mystical experience. That would fall under the, I suppose, heading of high strangeness.
Yes.
That term that is used a bit these days. And certainly what I would consider the high strangeness aspects have certainly come to the fore since say 2006, when that earlier book came out, because more people I think now are sort of prepared to talk about that aspect of it. So quite a lot of people say there was something uncanny about the experience. And as for the hypnotism, being hypnotized or put into a sort of a funny state by these things, Aboriginal people say that sometimes, like old Percy Mumbulla, a full-on, fully initiated Aboriginal man from the south coast of New South Wales. He said that years ago in the 1950s. Yeah. He said these things can put you to sleep. They can just put you to sleep. Yeah, funny thing, John Green, the old Sasquatch hunter, he was a very much flesh and blood man. He didn't want to hear anything about high strangeness or anything like that.
Yeah.
But he did say to me once, it's funny, how people get tired, very tired sometimes when they're, sort of hot on the trail of Bigfoot or following a trail of footprints or in an area like that, and they just they're really tired. And the same was mentioned in relation to a real doozy of a Orang Mawas story from Malaysia, which we'll have to talk about sometime, Paul. A great story where a big posse of rangers and game wardens and soldiers went after huge, big, hairy ape man in 1960, when was it? 1964 in the Malay Peninsula. Followed it for 5 days through this incredibly stinky, swampy area. Collecting great big stinking, huge big dropping, which indicated if you can dig this, a rectum that would have been, they said, was it 20 inch? Yeah, 20 inches in circumference. So the thing was supposed to be 10 feet tall, and the footprints were absolutely huge, 3-toed and up nearly 30 inches long.
Wow.
They called it Jarangigi. Their teeth far apart. But anyway, that's quite a story. Excuse me. I talked to the two principals, the leader of the party and his two IC, and they were remarkable men. They were both very well known in Malaysia, and World War II veterans and veterans of the Malayan emergency. And they said, no, this thing, there were many, many footprints, handprints as well. The thing was around their camps at night, screaming and tearing branches off the trees. But he said eventually they all got tired. They got tired and sick. And he said we didn't know what was wrong with us exactly, but we all felt like that. And so we packed it in after 5 days. So anyway, that's a bit of a digression, but maybe these hairy ape men internationally have a way of putting you to sleep or making you sick. I don't know.
Well, I suppose it all depends, Tony, on what kind of creatures. I mean, as often is the case when we talk about Bigfoot and Sasquatch in North America, I think there is this aspect that it can only be one or the other. So some people believe that these are interdimensional, paranormal creatures that have no flesh and blood grounding in the real world. Other people are the complete opposite. It is completely flesh and blood, and there is no paranormal aspects to it. What I find frustrating is, well, why can't both things exist? Why does it have to be a one size fits all? Because people sometimes think I'm being a bit churlish when I say this, Tony, but if we are to believe in certain aspects of the paranormal, I find it deeply frustrating that some people will not entertain the concept of the ghosts of animals, for instance. And I don't comprehend why, when there are reports from all around the world about people encountering ghost animals, cats, dogs, sheep, cows, horses, whatever. I mean, even here in the UK, we've got a couple of stories about ghost apes. So why doesn't it seems that no one wants to, either camp, Tony, don't want to talk about the thing in the middle that it might help both sides, is that why wouldn't there be ghosts of these creatures if they are sentient and intelligent and able to avoid us and show a level of intelligence that moves, kind of has them halfway between animal and human, because they're obviously people have mentioned that they've heard them having a language, like they're having conversations. There's evidence of tool making, of creating camps, nests, whatever. These are aspects that you would drift towards a more intelligent brain size of a creature, that it's able to adapt itself to that nobody wants to have this concept of the paranormal in it. It has to be one or the other, and that's before you even think about people who claim that they're being dropped off by UFOs to do mining, Tony.
Yes. Well, I agree with you that we have to consider the paranormal, or I'd sort of have a foot in both camps, I suppose. I mean, it's undeniable that these things have a physical reality, at least some of the time.
Yes.
I mean, they do leave footprints. They do tear branches off trees. I've seen a Yowie bed, constructed under a leaning tree. And And of course, Dean and his colleagues got those thermal images of that Yowie.
Yeah.
So they must have flesh and blood reality some of the time, but certainly they can just seem to like totally disappear. And I don't see why they can't be. Well, I mean, for want of a better explanation, maybe it's an explanation in inverted commas, but yeah, I think that's my best guess, is that they're interdimensional in some way. They can elect to be here, and why they bother, I don't know. They rampage around. Maybe in quiet areas of the country they're there all the time, or for long periods of time, and then they go away. But one of the first things I was told about Yowies by Aboriginal people was down the south coast of New South Wales, and this guy said, well, I said, yeah, I'm looking for the Yowie, or he said, well, you have fun, but you can't catch them. They're part spirit and part man. That's what they are. And then in Florida, in the Everglades, the Miccosukee Indian people told me a few things about the Europeans in Florida call the Bigfoot the skunk ape,
yes,
because of the smell and everything.
Yeah.
But these the Miccosukee Indians, they're the Don Osceola, the patrolman. I spent a bit of time with him, and he said, look, again, he used almost exactly the same phrase as the Aboriginal guy. He said, well, look, have fun looking for these things, but you're not going to catch them. He said, our term for them is Yati Wasagi, which means something like, translates as disappearing man or different man, something like that. And he said what my people are saying essentially is that these things come from another dimension, and they're here for a while. They'll kill a deer. They'll occasionally thump someone's car or rampage, leave a few tracks, and then they're just gone. And they're gone for about 10 years, and then they're back again. That's what I think. I think that more and more researchers are now realizing that time has slipped by. Decades and decades have slipped by. The reports keep coming in. The witnesses are still honest, but these things can't be caught. They can't be clearly photographed. I mean, Dean's thermal images are about as good as they get, as good as photographs get in Australia. The Patterson film may be the exception that proves the rule. I mean, I still like to believe that that's genuine. I met Bob Gimlin, and like everyone else who met him, I was totally convinced he was telling the truth. Besides which, I know that Bigfoot have been seen right there in that same gully since. But where was I going with this? I forget. Yeah, I think. Look, there are many things, many high strangeness elements that we didn't exactly go to town pushing the paranormal theory in this new book, but we did point out that a few things keep getting mentioned over and over again, like the number of incidents that happen on or underneath or very close to high voltage power lines, or in stormy weather, or in near electrical installations like microwave towers. The smell of the number of times that witnesses say the creature smelt like burnt electrical wiring, or burning Bakelite. That's been mentioned in North America as well. There's a couple of incidents in our book here, and I know of some from North America where car engines or motorbike engines have, or chainsaws have just ceased functioning. The motors have stopped when these things appear. So, the high strangeness elements are very significant, I think. Very difficult to explain if you just think these things are some kind of long-legged gorilla.
Yes. Do you still get similar reports? Because often when we hear some people who have encounters in North America, Tony, they will say that the forest goes silent before they have something. You know, like you were talking about the nameless dread, and sometimes people get this feeling, or they get a smell of something. But sometimes there are reports where people are saying, yes, and anybody that's spent time in nature, if you're in a forest or a wood or you're with something, people are often amazed how noisy it is. I think people have this idea that the city's noisy and you go somewhere like the woods, it's beautiful and tranquil, but essentially it's just full of animals shouting at each other, isn't it? So, so essentially, do you, when you've been doing the Yowie reports, does that still happen as well? That people say they're just walking, they can hear the birds squawking and creatures making noises, and then all of a sudden everything goes silent, and then they hear trees being broken and things like that.
That's right. Yeah. That happens quite a lot. There's several instances like that in the book. The bird and insect noise just stops, and on one occasion. One very interesting case in there, the wind, it was a windy day and the wind stopped as well. And there was this eerie sort of silence. Then a wallaby came crashing out of the scrub across the clearing in front of these two fellows and disappeared into the scrub on the other side. And it was being pursued by a small yowie or perhaps one of these jungities, the smaller creatures. And the creature jumped behind a stump and just peered at them across the top of the stump. Mesmerizing. They both felt sort of mesmerized and could hardly sort of break themselves away. They eventually ran. But he did a good sketch. I don't know whether you've run across it.
Yes.
The fellow's name was Michael Circle, Serkel.
Yeah.
Nice bloke. There's many people talk about the sudden silence. That occurs, as you probably know, sometimes also in fairy lore. People who claim to have seen the little people. They're walking along and all of a sudden everything goes quiet and They look over the fence and there's the little people dancing in a circle or what have you. I'm pretty sure I've also heard it in relation to a few alien big cat events.
Yes.
I can't bring any exact instance of it to mind, but I'm pretty sure. And a couple of Lochmora sightings involved this sort of very, very weird feeling as well. I think there's a lot of things that indicate that these things are perhaps not just flesh and blood animals. Like in some cases, the absolute speed that they run is just like supernaturally fast.
Yes.
Keeping up with a car that's going 100 kilometres an hour.
Yes.
Just way too much. And a couple of interesting cases in here of yowies just vanishing, absolutely vanishing. There's on page 200 actually, in 2003, a woman, Margaret McRae, and her daughter saw presumably a jungity. The thing was only about 4 feet 8 tall, slim and hair covered, but graceful, unusually graceful. And they forced their horses to forward and followed this thing across an open paddock. It went into a copse of saplings, no bigger in diameter than 0.2 of a metre. That's about 8 inches, just saplings.
Yeah.
And the copse of saplings was no bigger than a small living room.
Mm.
And they went right up there, and the thing had vanished. There was nowhere for it to go, just gone. So there's another sighting from Nambucca up northern New South Wales too, where the thing ran behind a slightly bigger tree, but just disappeared. Dean Harrison has heard several times of things just vanishing. Then a policeman I know, a friend of Dean's, who's been out in the bush with Dean and Paul Cropper on occasion. He was stopped in his car near that spot where Dean was shoulder charged and knocked into the creek.
Mm.
This policeman was stopped on the nearest track to that area, and he heard footsteps approaching from behind, crunch, crunch, crunch on the dry leaves, and the footsteps went crunch, crunch, crunch past the vehicle. He had the window open and continued on, but there was nothing there. It was daylight, and another fellow told me of a similar incident on his property in broad daylight. He could clearly hear this thing coming right at him and past, and but it was invisible. There's been the odd report like that from North America too. I recall one where footprints were seen approaching in the snow, but nothing was making the footprints.
Yes.
I mean, skeptics would be, rolling their eyes and just yelling out bullshit. But there's one of the most interesting books from North America that I've read in recent times. In fact, it's a set of 2 books. I don't know whether you've heard of them. It's they're by Joshua Cutchin and
Yes.
Timothy Renner.
Yes.
Where the footprints end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, high strangeness and the Bigfoot phenomenon. And it's they're 2 books that are just chock full of super duper weird events. I mean, I guess they say, as Paul and I do, well, look, the vast majority of Yowie and Bigfoot reports are the normal ones. Someone just sees a big hairy ape man, it looks at them, walks into the scrub, and it's all over. But a significant proportion feature these high strangeness elements. So I thought their books were well. Of course, I liked them because they confirmed my prejudice. My point of view. Another good one too, I suppose you've probably seen it, is The Locals by Tom Powell.
Yes.
A retired school teacher over there in Oregon.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know him very well, but I camped in my camper van in his backyard when I was there once, and the backyard backs onto forest, as a lot of them do over there.
Mm.
He'd been out chasing Bigfoot for years and years.
Yeah.
And slowly started to realise there was something decidedly uncanny about the whole phenomenon. And then the damn thing started to follow him home. He'd had a couple of incidents. He said, yeah, they've been up there in the scrub just beyond the back lawn, as it were. So, yeah, anyway, I think a lot of the researchers now are saying, well, it's getting a bit late in the day to say these things are just flesh and blood. I mean, people are trigger happy enough in Australia, but in North America, I mean, really, and in the frontier days, people would be just shooting. God, I think of the number of Indians that were shot dead and all kinds of people, wars with the French and, there would be at least one Bigfoot corpse, and there'd be at least a dozen Yowie corpses if they were flesh and blood. Someone would have shot them or knocked them over with a truck. Hey, what did you think of that 2018 event up there in the Gold Coast hinterland where the truck driver Glenn Kilmartin almost collided with the Yowie? That
is one of those encounters, Tony. That's one of those that obviously it's 4 or 5 years ago, isn't it? I think, was it 2018 that happened?
2018. It was a good one. Yeah. October 2018.
Yeah, I remember hearing his interview with Dean on their channel. And he was still pretty freaked out by what had happened, because it's a crazy encounter, because it's one of those, Tony, whenever we talk about strange things, whenever, as we've touched on, whenever people who don't believe any of this think it's all rubbish, when you get a story like Glenn's, it's one of two things. It's either a complete fabrication or it happened. There's no in between at all.
Yes. Yep.
And I find it, as I've often said to other people, for some reason, Tony, I tend to give a lot more credence to encounters with Yowies in Australia than I do with a lot of Bigfoot encounters, because as we're talking about bias or whatever, there is something in me that thinks that Aussies are a bit more straight down the line. They're not gonna, if they don't think something's happening, they're just gonna tell you straight up. They're not gonna, dress it up and flower it up for you, Tony. They're gonna tell you what they really think. And so when you hear somebody like Glenn, you've got to take him on face value, because, and this is the other aspect, this is a guy who drives a truck. He's quite happy to give his full name, what he does, where he was. People will know who he is. So for him to say, this has happened to me, and the fact that the thing puts its hands on his, on the front of his car and basically looks at him. I mean, you just, and he's saying, I'm really high up. I think he's saying he must have been 8 or 9 feet tall because of where he was in the cab. Yeah. And he's just saying, good God. I mean, it's an incredible encounter. And
it's a good one.
Ironically, it was the first case on my list, because when I heard it, I was like, this has definitely happened, 100%. I completely believe this chap. He saw it enough to do a drawing, a description of it to an artist who described it, drew it for him. He'd done interviews with Dean and stuff, and obviously you guys have got it in the book. It's probably, for me, one of the most compelling Yowie encounters out of Oz, certainly in the modern era.
Yeah, it was certainly the outstanding event of that year, for sure. And the good thing about it is that that stretch of road, unknown to that truck driver, Glenn Kilmartin, but there had been 2 other reports. One, practically in the same spot. When was that? That was a couple of years earlier. Both of these events were in broad daylight, and then there was a soldier who saw a Yowie crossing the road just a matter of 2 kilometres further on. So, what have we got here? 2 other people have reported very similar events in the vicinity. In 1986, a huge shaggy ape-man ran across the Bow Desert Road, which goes through there, about 4 kilometres from Glenn's experience. That was a soldier, Lester Davidson, who saw that one, and this is on the edge of what's known as the Land Warfare Centre, the Canungra Jungle Training Area, and that soldier said the infantry fellows at 10 RIC have seen quite a few in the bush in the Land Warfare Centre, plenty of stories. So there was that, and then, of course, just 3 kilometres from there, young Aaron Carmichael actually collided with one on the 2nd of March 2001.
Yeah.
We've got a picture of that in the first book. Smashed up his car pretty thoroughly.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's good. So it would have been great if Glenn Kilmartin had someone else in the truck with him at the time to, verify the story. But as you say, he came across just so genuine. And given the fact that there were these, 3 other events within, a stone's throw, really, I'd say his report was one of the best we have in the book here.
Yeah. I mean, as you've touched on there, Tony, I think often what gets missed sometimes is when these incidents occur. I mean, Glenn says it's 10 a.m., around 10 a.m. in the morning, and he's driving around the corner and he thinks it's a rock till it stands up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, he thought it was a...
This is not a fleeting glimpse of something that could be misconstrued or whatever.
Yeah.
And then,
it stood up. It stood up, and then it was right up with his chest virtually on the grill of the truck.
Yes.
And it gave him that really, he said that about 3 expressions seemed to pass across its face. There was shock, and then anger, and it thumped the front of the truck and turned and walked away. Yeah. But, at first he thought it was a big rock that had rolled down off the bank in a cloud of dust, and he braked, and then it stood up, and there it was in his face, big time. But you say Australians seem to be trustworthy. Well, I don't know. Well, I guess we're no different from anyone else.
Yes.
Some of the American witnesses I spoke to were just, I would bet my pension on the fact that they were telling the truth. There was one deputy sheriff, Virgil, I think his name was Virgil Harrington. Renee Hinden put me onto him, and his experience was a little bit like Glenn Kilmartin's. He was driving around a bend in his patrol car, and something came down the bank to his right, and it like tumbling down, went flat on its face in the middle of the road, and he braked, of course, and it's this gigantic Bigfoot, and stood up and gave him a really dirty look, like, no smart remarks, buddy, or something. Gave him a back off kind of a glare.
Yeah.
And walked off to the other side of the track, and it was holding a big fish in its hand. When Glenn reported his sighting, I was put in mind of what Virgil Harrington said about his. It was a daylight event too,
Yeah.
And he was just a salt of the earth sort of guy.
Absolutely. I just want to read this last paragraph with the interview that Paul had with Glenn, which kind of just sums the whole experience up for me. And Glenn says, "I've never seen anything so big, so magnificent is the word I'd use, because he was just, whatever he was a really fine specimen. You could see his muscles underneath the hair, pecs and abs and all that. Everything about him was magnificent. He was an ugly sucker, but his body was just beautiful." which is a level of detail, Tony, that you've got to say, whatever Glenn's experience, whether it's on this plane or what, and the fact that the creature slapped the hood of his bonnet and the bonnet cracked, but it didn't leave a handprint, I don't think. I mean, either Glenn's wasted his entire life because he should have been a screenwriter, Tony, or having heard him speak several times, this happened to him because he was so shaken. Like he said, because I think one of the things he's also said is it scared the crap out of him. but he was also awestruck. He was frightened, but also awestruck by the whole encounter. And a lot of encounters that are that close, you get these people that are scared, but also amazed at what they're seeing. And I think often it's the fact that they're seeing something that normal society tells them can't exist, doesn't exist. It's not true. None of it. And then when it happens to somebody like Glenn, you're like, you know, I mean, he was so shaken, he didn't even turn the car back on. He just rolled to the bottom of the hill and had a cigarette, didn't he? Just to collect himself. Yeah. So you just think, for the grace of God go I, Tony. You just, until it happens to you, that kind of thing, you just think, what on earth? You don't know how you would react.
Yeah. I just hope I had the presence of mind to take a photograph.
Yes.
But I mean, if these things are flesh and blood, as a lot of people still hope, then I reckon the photographic evidence is going to be collected by a dash cam, you know, in a car, because the number of people who I've spoken to or read about who've had a camera around their neck or in their pocket or even in their hand when they've encountered a Bigfoot or a Yowie, and they're just too stunned to do anything.
Yeah.
So if you've got a dash cam running constantly, then if they're flesh and blood, I mean, they do occasionally just get caught by surprise in crossing a road.
Yeah.
That's the way it's going to happen. Same with the Tasmanian tiger. You know, in Tasmania, when I was down there, I had 3 dash cams going all the time in my van. 2 sticking out the, windscreen at slight angles and 1 out the side window. And, about 2 or 3 cameras on or about my person,
Yeah.
But, of course, it didn't happen. But that will solve the mystery down there, I think. I think there's a good chance the Tasmanian tiger, the thylacines, that there's just a few of them left there. And more people are getting vehicles with dash cams.
Yeah.
So hopefully the evidence will come that way.
Yeah. It also seems that science seems to be moving the goalposts when it comes to the Tasmanian tiger as well, Tony. I've noticed over the last sort of 2 or 3 years the conversation has changed from Benjamin was the last one that died in the 1930s. That's it. It's a real shame. Yeah. Can't do anything. And obviously we've got these people that keep popping up every 2 years claiming that they're going to reintroduce them using DNA. I know it's the same company that keeps talking about bringing the woolly mammoth back, Tony. So whether it's just self-publicisation for funding or share prices, I'm not too sure. A cynical person would suggest such a thing, Tony, but, So it does seem interesting that I've read a lot recently that people are saying, well, they think that it may have now survived into the 1980s or even the 90s. But once again, as we've spoken about hairy hominids, Tony, some of the people that have these sightings, that have really clear sightings, are people that work in the forests. These are people that are outside all the time. These are people who work with animals. I mean, there's a very famous Tasmanian tiger incident with a naturist who was out there. I think he was studying the local botany, doing a review or something, and he was in a tent when one walked into his camp. So, if we're not going to take his word for it, we might as well just give up, because he actually knows what he's supposed to be looking for.
Yes, and there's plenty of several multi-witness accounts too. There is one fellow we spoke to, he and his wife saw a thylacine. They were driving south along the main highway, actually, between Launceston and Hobart, and there was a car coming the other way, and the thylacine got confused and ran into a rabbit-proof fence and rebounded. So both carloads of people had time to look at this thing. And that wasn't that long ago. I think it was it was in the 1990s, I think.
Yeah.
So you get the multiple eyewitness accounts. Some of the mainland thylacine reports are very, very interesting as well. Talked to rangers who've seen them. I've talked to dog breeders who've seen them close up and said it wasn't a dog, it was a thylacine. Surveyor I worked with saw one. So I don't know, as you said earlier, there's Australia's a big country and there's a lot of wilderness out there with not too many people in it.
Yeah. Well, I think, is it something like 90% of the Australian population live on the coast?
Oh, yeah. Well, 90% live in the, I don't know whether it's 90%, but a good big percentage live in the half dozen largest cities.
Yeah.
So, most of us cling to the coast. It gets a bit dry once you cross the Great Divide and get up to the west.
Certainly
it's got its charms, Yeah. It's nice to be able to drive around over there and camp wherever you like and stop. It's all good, but I think most people like to be near a bit of water, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It calms the mind, Tony. Calms the mind, I think.
It does indeed, yeah.
I think there's one aspect of the Yowies I want to touch on before we wrap it up on this particular episode, Tony. And we've mentioned this in our previous conversations, and we've touched on it slightly earlier on today. ABCs. Now, I remember you telling me a very amusing story about when you went out to Bluff Creek and you were talking to the locals and people saying, I've never seen a Bigfoot, but I have seen the Black Panthers. And I've told all these Bigfoot researchers and they didn't care because it wasn't Bigfoot.
That's right.
Obviously, over the years, there have been occasional reports in North America of people seeing Bigfoot and Sasquatch accompanied by Black Panthers. I've even heard stories of Black Panthers and Fawn Panthers being seen. I know there are a couple of stories of people who have seen a Yowie and then seen an ABC. Tony, is that something that still goes on? And do you have these reports of people seeing a Yowie and a panther in the same area at the same time, the same person having the same experience?
Not absolutely at the same time. Not like as if the Yowie's walking along with a black panther on a leash, or. But there's certainly there's one. There's a young guy called Lenny something or other in the book here. And his girlfriend saw a black panther 4 days after he saw a Yowie, and it was on the same dirt road, the same stretch of road. So he said, look, I don't know whether there's any connection, but it just seems like, I don't know, there must be, because we saw this black panther right where I'd seen the Yowie 4 days before. In the book, as I said, we get 200 reports dating from the early colonial era to the mid-1970s, and then to bring it right up to date, we have another 71 reports in the modern era. Well, those modern era witnesses, by and large, are the ones that we spoke to ourselves. We did interview some of the people who had seen Yowies in the 1930s and 40s, but obviously most of them have passed on. So we got most of those early reports from newspaper archives or from old journals and diaries and so on. But the modern era reports, I took particular notice when I was interviewing witnesses if they mentioned Black Panthers or cougars, and I made a special note of it. And I always encouraged Dean Harrison and Paul, when they were interviewing Yowie witnesses, to sort of wrap up the interview by saying, have you had any other strange experiences by any chance?
Yeah.
And it's worth asking, because they, frequently say, I saw a Black Panther once, and they think, these things, they escape from zoos or something.
Yeah.
In North America, they assume usually that they're black pigmented cougars, which is zoologically impossible. There's no such thing as black cougars, yet people report seeing black panthers, black cougars in Bigfoot areas. There was a sighting right near our camp at Mount St. Helens when we were looking for Sasquatches. So the number of witnesses who, in our book, who had either seen a black panther themselves or a close family member had seen a black panther. In one case, the girl's twin sister had seen the black panther and she'd seen the Yowie. There were 10 instances out of 71 reports. That's 1 in 7. 1 in 7 reports where people had also seen a black panther or a family member had.
Yeah.
And I bet London to a brick, if all these decades, if we had always asked people if they'd had any other strange experiences, there would have been many others who had that experience. So, there's a definite connection. In North America, I ran across, there were 6 areas that I went to all across the continent where I was there looking for Sasquatches, Bigfoot, and people would say, we've seen the Yowie around here, the Bigfoot around here. Are you interested in that other thing that's been hanging around? And after a while, I knew what they were going to say. I'd say, oh, yeah, what? And they'd say, oh, big black cougar, big black panther. And acting strangely, too, some of these panthers, it seemed not to be particularly scared of the cars or the people.
Yeah.
They just casually wander around. One panther walked diagonally across the same field that a Bigfoot had walked across, the same diagonal, not long before, a week or so before. And the farmer who saw the black panther, his neighbours saw the Bigfoot walking across his field. But 2 weeks later, this farmer, Farrell Shook, his name was, nice guy.
Yeah.
He's on the tractor with the motor going, and something walked past right beside the tractor, and he said it was a black panther, and it just looked up at him and continued walking across the same path, the same diagonal that the Bigfoot had.
Yeah. And
it had a chicken in its mouth. And another guy I talked to, I interviewed, a guy called Lloyd Randall. He saw a creature going across the road and on icy conditions. He said it was the day that came the big ice, he said. And anyway, this thing was going across, and he said, I thought it was a big black and tan hound dog, but it was too big. And when he got up level with it, it got to the bank beside the road, and it stood up on its hind legs and held its arms out like in a crucifix position almost. And he said it was like an ape. It had this brown hair all over it. And I said, what did its face look like? And he said, I can't say. It had a cotton-picking chicken in its mouth. I said, wow. Anyway, there were several Black Panther reports around there. And at Round Bluff Creek in Northern California, where the Bigfoot got its name.
Yeah.
Where else? Oh, at Florida.
Yeah.
It was, anyway, I could go on and on. Drive you crazy.
Yeah, it's just another facet of it, and I'm always, like you say there, it makes you wonder when we've touched on this before, Tony, just how many times things like this have slipped through the cracks in the past because people are so fixated on their phenomenon that they're not interested in anything else, and it's frustrating. But I think as we've moved forwards, more people have that point of view now that they'll say, has anything else happened? Have you seen anything else? Because I think if you're really into the particular subject, you will want to discuss all kinds of strange creatures rather than just the one that the old like the 4 horsemen of Bigfoot in those days, or the people that went into the Himalayas just looking for the Yeti or whatever. How many other creatures they may have missed, these strange animals that shouldn't be where they are, but, and obviously we still get the report. I mean, there's been tons already this year in the UK. I think I can think of a dozen sightings that have been reported in the press already this year. Good God. And I know when you were at Loch Ness, you met somebody who was telling you about the Black Panthers up there. So it's
yes, quite a lot. Yeah, quite a lot.
They're everywhere.
Yes. I thought it particularly suspicious at Loch Ness that they were on that little peninsula between Orlam Bay and Inchnacarradock Bay.
Yes.
It's a peninsula, only about 2.5 acres in extent. And the lady there said, yes, we've had the big black cats and the brown ones as well. There was another black panther behind the pub there, the Inchnacarradock Arms. And, numerous Black Panther reports. Very suspicious. Seemed like the Loch Ness monster reports were fading a bit, and they're being replaced by the Black Panther reports. But the people up there, most of them just say, well, they must have escaped from menageries. They must have. But I don't think that's it. I think there's something very odd about the Black Panthers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the new book with yourself and Paul is phenomenal. And as it says on the back of it, it's a companion piece. It's not a sequel. It's not a rewriting of the original book. I'm now very fortunate that I own both of them, Tony. I dropped on, I found a copy of the first book, the Yowie, a couple of years ago on Amazon, and I thought, right, I'm not bothered. It was in my budget, and it wasn't 3 figures, so I thought I'm having that. And so it sits pride of place amongst my ever-growing hairy hominid collection from around the world, Tony, and I'm delighted that this new one is here because, as I said, it's one of the books I've been eagerly awaiting for a long time, and it's fantastic. And anybody that's got any interest in cryptozoology or anything to do with strange things in Australia especially, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's another brilliant collection between yourself and Paul.
Oh, gee, that's great. Yeah, gee, I really appreciate that, mate. I mean, you really know your stuff. I mean, you're across this subject, cryptozoology, and I appreciate your kind words and I respect your opinion. So let's talk again, eh?
Absolutely. Well, like I say, Tony, you always make time for me. It's when I was a young chap reading that article in the mid-90s, I never thought we'd end up getting to know each other and becoming friends. So it's an honour and a pleasure, and you're always very considerate with your time. You make time for me, and we work out our time zones, and we can always get things out. So where can everybody get a hold of the copy of the book, follow your work, and anything else you've got coming up, my friend?
Oh, well, just Amazon, the old Amazon, will bring them, will deliver it to your door.
Yeah.
Well, as for what's happening next, as usual, I'm floundering around and trying to do too many things at once. I've got my very, very much delayed memoir, Monster Safari, to complete. And that's, if only I could apply myself, I could possibly knock it over. I think I'll finish it this year, I think. It just needs a massive edit because as it is, it would run to 600 pages, I think. So I think I'll be able to cut it down, all right. And then I've got what started out as a children's book. I was writing it for my nieces and nephews, and it's based on the adventures of based on the tall stories of my great uncle Jeremiah Healy, born in 1870 odd. He was still alive when I was very young, and he had an adventurous life.
Yeah.
And so I've sort of taken the liberty of changing massive number of details. He manages to get himself from Ireland to Australia by himself when he's an indeterminate age. He seems to be about 8 or 10 or something.
Yep.
And he runs into lake monsters, yetis. He gets kidnapped by pirates and mermaids. A man-eating tree grabs him, gets swallowed by a whale. The sort of stuff that happens if you leave the safety of Ireland. And so anyway, that's nearly finished. I'm happy with that. But like everyone who writes a children's book, it's really a young adult's book now. Like everyone who attempts that, I think it's great, but I'm embracing myself and really fully expecting that the publishers will say, yeah, thanks, Mr. Healy. They don't call us, because many are called, but few are chosen, but it's fun writing it anyway.
Yeah,
so, hopefully the Monster Safari memoir will be finished by, let's say early next year, and then we'll see if I'm sure I'll be able to get it published. Yeah, anyway, look, thanks a million, Paul, for your interest, mate. I do appreciate it, for someone who knows his stuff like you do, and your enthusiasm and generosity. So,
mate, it's always a pleasure. You always take time for me, so thank you for spending some time. And I know it's not going to be 2 years till we speak again, because I'm hopeful we'll speak again later this year in regards to some creatures of the water, Tony. So until then, my friend, you take care.
Okay.
And thank you.
For sure. Okay, Paul. Yeah. Cheers, mate.